There's a specific kind of moment every training camp eventually produces, where the story stops being about depth charts and starts being about culture. And the Raiders hit that moment yesterday the instant Kirk Cousins and Maxx Crosby got tangled up on the field. I want to walk you through exactly what happened, because the way a brand new head coach handles a scene like that tells you more about a locker room than any practice tape ever could. Fights happen in August. Every camp in the league has one. The pads go on, the heat gets miserable, guys are competing for jobs, and eventually somebody crosses a line that wasn't there back in June minicamp. Normally it's two roster bubble players scrapping it out, and by dinner nobody's even talking about it anymore. This one stuck around because of who was involved. Not fringe guys fighting for a practice squad spot. The starting quarterback and the best player on the defense, two men this entire organization is leaning on to set the tone for everybody else in that building. When those two get physical, it's not routine camp noise anymore. It's a test of culture, and a test of how a first-year staff wants to be seen this early in their tenure. Day 9 of camp, the last open practice before the team moves operations into Allegiant Stadium. Walking in, the expectation was simple: stack good tape, get separation at the skill positions, build momentum before preseason. Instead, the headline leaving the facility was two grown men getting into it, and a head coach who decided right then that it mattered enough to act on immediately. Here's the detail I think gets buried in all the noise around this. Cousins and Crosby weren't pulled from the entire day. They ran their individual position drills like normal, no different from any other Tuesday. But once the practice shifted into team periods, the live look reps against a real opposing unit, both of them were standing on the sideline. That's not a symbolic gesture. Team periods are where the actual evaluation happens this deep into camp. Losing those reps means losing the ones that count the most. Clint Kubiak didn't soften it when he addressed the situation afterward. There's a standard for how this team practices and how it carries itself, and yesterday that standard got broken. No built-in excuse because of who was involved, no quiet pass because of contract size or reputation around the league. If anything, I'd argue the fact that it involved two veterans makes the message hit harder. These are the exact players who are supposed to be setting the tone for the other 50-plus guys in that room. When a head coach holds his most respected players accountable like that, publicly and immediately, it tells the entire roster that nobody gets an exemption. That's the kind of discipline you want out of a staff trying to build an identity from scratch, with a locker room still figuring out who it is. Sit with the spot Kubiak is actually operating from here for a second. First-year head coach, a room full of established veterans who've played for other coordinators, other systems, other cultures entirely. Guys who don't automatically buy in just because there's a new name on the whiteboard. The easy move is to let something like this slide, call it competitive fire, and quietly move on. He didn't take that route. He pulled two of his most important players out of the exact reps that matter most this late in camp, knowing it would cost his quarterback room real snaps right before preseason opens. You don't make that call if you're worried about ruffling feathers. You make it because you're building a culture, and you need the whole building to understand right now that the rules apply to everybody. I think that decision ages well for him, even if it stings this week. It also tells you something about the weight already sitting on top of this position group. Cousins is here to stabilize things and mentor a rookie the franchise took with a premium pick. Crosby has been the identity of this defense for years now. When two players carrying that kind of responsibility get tangled up physically, the scuffle itself almost isn't the story. The story is confirmation that every single rep right now is being treated like it matters, because in this building, it genuinely does. There's a leverage angle worth sitting with too. Neither Cousins nor Crosby needed to prove anything about their competitive edge to this staff. Their resumes already handle that, so this moment was never really about either of them losing standing in the building. If anything, it's a reminder to everyone watching, the younger players fighting for a role, the guys on the roster bubble, that intensity has a ceiling, and crossing it comes with consequences no matter how much equity you've banked. That's a much harder lesson to teach with a speech than with an actual benching, and Kubiak just taught it the hard way, in front of the entire roster. Now let me clear something up because it got messy fast online. A clip of Crosby talking about a fight started circulating like it was a fresh reaction to what happened with Cousins. It wasn't. That audio was old, pulled from a press conference tied to a completely unrelated incident involving Cam Akers years back. Somebody dug it up, dropped it into today's news cycle, and let the lack of context do the damage on its own. A few outlets ran with it without checking the timeline, and that kind of thing frustrates me, because misinformation always travels faster than the correction. Credit where it's due, plenty of fans caught the mismatch almost immediately. The audio didn't line up with the actual events, and enough people noticed and said so. Here's what actually matters more than any of that noise. The relationship between Cousins and Crosby is fine. This isn't a fracture in the locker room. It's two competitors who got heated in the moment, crossed a line the staff cares about, and are expected to be right back at it Monday since there's no practice tomorrow. Nobody in that building is losing sleep over this. But it does tell you something real about the intensity of camp in August. When tempers run short in a physical, competitive environment, and moments like this become almost inevitable. Because both veterans were pulled from those team drills, something unplanned happened. Fernando Mendoza got extended run with the starters. The #1 overall pick taking first-team reps in a setting he wouldn't normally see this early, and it gave everybody watching a real preview of what a preseason snapshot under center might actually look like with him running the show. Think about how rare that opportunity is at this stage of a rookie's development. Even a quarterback drafted at the very top usually has to earn his way into starter reps gradually. Coaches protect that hierarchy on purpose because jumping the line too early can create real friction with an established starter. But a scuffle-triggered absence just handed Mendoza an entire practice of exposure he wasn't scheduled to get yet. Growth doesn't always come from a scripted plan. Sometimes it comes from circumstance, and how a young quarterback responds when that door swings open without warning tells you something real about whether he's ready for the version of this moment that actually counts. He didn't start clean. A couple of shaky exchanges at the snap threw off his rhythm early, and he wasn't pushing the ball vertically the way evaluators eventually want to see from him. But as the practice went on, he settled in, and by the second half, he was operating with real command. Tight, accurate throws. A touchdown to Brock Bowers, another to Michael Mayer in the red zone, a score to Trey Tucker. Then in the 2-minute period, 5 straight completions strung together to set up a field goal look, the kind of situational execution that gets graded closely behind the scenes even if it never shows up on a highlight reel. I want to stay honest about the context here, because it matters. Some of that rhythm almost certainly comes from Crosby not rushing the passer that day. A pass rush that disruptive changes a quarterback's internal clock entirely, forces faster decisions, alters the pocket in ways that expose footwork issues a rookie hasn't cleaned up yet. So I'm not ready to crown anything off one practice against a diminished front. That caveat is real, and I'd be doing you a disservice pretending otherwise. What I am willing to say is that the growth curve is visible. Every week Mendoza looks a little more comfortable in the huddle, a little more in command, a little less like a rookie still chasing NFL speed. That kind of incremental progress is exactly what you want from a first-round quarterback this deep into camp. With preseason arriving next week, development at this position rarely moves in a straight line. It's small, compounding gains, a cleaner read here, a quicker decision there, until suddenly the operation looks like it belongs to somebody who's been running it for years instead of weeks. That's the trajectory I keep watching for, and today gave me more reason to believe it's actually happening. Which brings up the question I can't shake. What do the Raiders actually do with this quarterback room once preseason starts for real? Do they give Cousins a series or two and hand the rest over to Mendoza? Do they let him run a full outing against a real opponent and see how he handles it start to finish? My instinct says the Arizona matchup is where they find out. It's a live setting without the safety net of scripted reps, and how he responds under that kind of pressure will tell the staff more than another week of padded practice ever could. Quarterbacks coach Mike Sullivan spoke on Mendoza afterward, and one line stuck with me. He said Mendoza keeps improving and isn't repeating the same mistakes twice. That phrase gets thrown around a lot in coach speak, but here it actually means something specific. Mistakes in practice are expected, especially for a rookie absorbing a brand new system. The separator is whether those mistakes get corrected or whether they keep showing back up. Sullivan pointed to specific growth areas, handling crowd noise, working through silent counts, layering in complexity that simply wasn't part of the installation back in the spring. Those are exactly the situational wrinkles that trip rookies up once games start counting for real. Hearing the staff describe him absorbing that instead of getting stuck on it is a real signal, not just a feel-good soundbite for the cameras. Sullivan also explained why reps with the top group matter so much, even in a limited window. It's about exposing Mendoza to realistic tempo, whether that's behind the 1s, 2s, or 3s, against a defense playing at full speed. The idea is stretching him without letting him get ahead of himself, and from how Sullivan described it, that hasn't really been a concern with this one. He's locked into the process. He's not forcing plays that aren't there. That's the mentality you want from a young passer who's eventually going to be handed the keys to a franchise. There's a version of this story where a rookie quarterback, suddenly thrown into first-team reps because of a suspension, tries to do too much, forces a home run throw to prove he belongs, speeds up his process trying to look more polished than he actually is. That's not what happened here. By every account, Mendoza stayed within the offense. took what the defense gave him, and let the operation come to him instead of reaching for moments that weren't there. That kind of discipline, especially from a rookie who just got handed an opportunity nobody planned for him, says something about his makeup that a stat line alone can't capture. While all of that was unfolding, Aiden O'Connell had his own quietly productive day that deserves more attention than it's getting. With Cousins sidelined, O'Connell picked up extra work with the twos and looked sharp doing it, connecting with Devin Tompkins and E.J. Williams for touchdowns and red zone work. There have been rough patches across this quarterback room. That's normal for August, but the offense as a whole is starting to find some rhythm, and O'Connell is a quiet part of why. He's not the headline today, and I understand that, with Cousins and Mendoza soaking up every bit of attention around them. But a veteran backup who can step in and produce clean, efficient football without any drama attached is genuinely valuable on a roster navigating this much uncertainty at the position. He's exactly the kind of stabilizing presence a coaching staff wants available if something unexpected happens once the season starts. And today was another quiet reminder that he's more than capable of holding that role down if called on. Devin Tompkins deserves more attention as well. He signed with this team recently, stepped into a receiver room that's still wide open for anybody willing to claim a role. And over these last several practices, he's been doing exactly that. I wouldn't call him a lock yet. There's real ground to cover before final cuts, but the flashes are legitimate, and special teams could end up being his actual path onto this roster, even if the receiver depth chart doesn't break his way right away. He's part of a bigger picture at that position, alongside names like Malik Benson, where nothing is settled and everything gets decided once real football starts. That's the story of this entire receiver room. There's no established hierarchy the way there is at other spots on this roster. Guys are earning real chances to climb based purely on what they show in practice, and that kind of competitive uncertainty tends to bring out the best in players who know their roster spot isn't guaranteed. It's going to be one of the more fascinating battles to track once preseason kicks off, because practice flashes only tell you so much until the pads come off and the lights come on against players who aren't wearing the same jersey every single day. I'd also keep an eye on how the coaching staff uses preseason snaps to sort through that group. When a position battle is this open, the reps themselves become a message. Guys who get extended, run with the 2s and 3s in live game action, are usually the ones the staff is genuinely undecided about, while the roster spots that already feel settled tend to get lighter workloads once the games start. Watching who plays deep into these preseason contests will tell you almost as much about the pecking order as watching who wins one-on-ones in practice all camp long. Last thing I want to get into, and honestly, this comparison stopped me for a second. Joe Woods talked about Hezekiah Massey's coverage instincts, specifically that tightness and lateral quickness when he's pressed up on a receiver, and said it reminds him of a corner he coached before in Cleveland, Denzel Ward. That's not a name defensive coordinators throw around loosely. Ward built his entire reputation on exactly that trait, elite short area quickness that lets him stay glued to a receiver right off the line. Woods was careful to clarify he isn't calling Massey the next Denzel Ward, and that's the right way to frame it. But when a coach who was in the building with Ward makes that connection unprompted, it tells you the traits are genuinely standing out on the practice field. The buzz around Massey has been building all camp, and now I understand why. Still, my approach here hasn't changed. Practice reps are encouraging, but I want to see it translate against a real opponent trying to beat him, not a scripted rep in shorts and pads against the same receivers he sees every single day. Coverage instincts that look elite in a controlled setting can look completely different against a receiver who's studied the film and knows exactly how to attack that lateral quickness. That's not a knock on Massey, it's just the reality of evaluating defensive backs in August. If the ceiling is real, and I have real reason to think it might be given who's making the comparison, we'll find out soon enough once preseason games actually start counting for something. So that's where this camp stands heading into a much-needed off day. Two veterans getting reeled in by their own head coach, a rookie quarterback getting a genuine trial run with the starters, a backup quietly building his own case, a receiver room still completely up for grabs, and a young corner drawing serious praise from a coach who's earned the right to make that kind of comparison. There's real drama in this story, but underneath it, there's a lot of legitimate development happening too, and preseason is about to put every bit of it to the test.